Okay, hi everyone and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have this conversation about digital accessibility, the EAA, and how product teams can approach it in a more sustainable and practical way. To kick off, a quick introduction to who we are. I'm Glenn, I'm part of the client services team here at Zoonou. We're a software testing company and we help our clients to create better software. Accessibility testing is a big part of that, and we work with all kinds of teams to navigate compliance and embed best practices into their development process. Representing our side of the chat today, we have William Bunch, our head of accessibility. Hey, Will.
Hi, Glenn.
He's been with Zoonou for 8 years or so and has led the way on hundreds of high-profile accessibility testing and consultancy projects. Bringing together expertise from different fields helps us create digital experiences that are not just legally compliant, but truly inclusive for everyone. That's why Brightec are a key partner for us, and we're joined today by James Allwright, who is their head of design. Hey, James.
Hey, Glenn.
Together, we've worked on a huge variety of projects, collaborating closely to deliver inclusive and impactful websites and apps. So, why are we here? To address the elephant in the room, the deadline for the EAA is just around the corner, and many product teams are still unclear as to how they'll work towards compliance. During this session, we'll highlight some key points to consider and hopefully provide some practical advice on the steps that you need to take. That said, outside of the legal implications of EAA, there's space to discuss the wider importance and ethics of digital accessibility and how teams can build better practices into their ongoing product development. That's something both William and James have tons of experience with. Accessibility is something that needs to be carefully implemented at all stages, from design all the way through to test and release. That requires a lot of collaboration, and our partnership is a great example of that. So to get a sense of where everyone's at today, we'd love to start with a quick interactive poll. That should pop up on your screen just now if you're using the Teams app, or in the chat if you're on a web browser. It would be great to get your feedback as to your current understanding of the European Accessibility Act. There's a scale from beginner to expert, but there are really no wrong answers. We'd just love to know where you're at. Okay, so as those results come in, and before we jump in, just a quick note, we'll have about 10 minutes or so at the end for questions. Feel free to drop them into the Q&A section at any time. You should see a tab at the top of your screen, and tapping that will open a side panel where you can drop your questions. The questions are moderated, so we'll keep an eye on those and try to cover as many as we can at the end. With that, let's dive into the conversation and start unpacking the subject of EAA and the wider scope of digital accessibility. William, James, thanks again for joining us. How are we both doing today?
Yeah, doing good. It's been a busy morning.
Yeah,
nice.
Me too.
James, all good? Great. Cool. Let's jump into the first question then. So, how are product teams typically responding to the EAA? What trends are you seeing? Are they acting now or are they waiting? William, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, of course. So we've seen a real mixture on our side of things. I don't know if that's the same on James's side, but we've got a variety of kind of people that have been very aware of the act and kind of approaching it with the attitude of kind of like you're getting towards a stop sign and you need to stop and be putting your brakes on now. And a lot of people that are kind of more unaware of it and just about to find out about it and more going to be reacting and slamming the brakes on very quickly, as it were. Certainly, we've had some issues where people have not been 100% certain if the European Accessibility Act is something that's relevant to them, where it's important to them, whether that's because they are a business that sits in the UK and they're unsure as to whether it's something they need to be considering for their services that are going into the EU or not. But equally, where people are unsure if the services that they even offer are something that is regulated by the European Accessibility Act. And one thing that I've found that has somewhat posed a challenge in having these conversations is some of the information, even with about 10 days to go, isn't 100% clear on what people need to be doing. I was looking at an article this morning that was talking around kind of the requirements for accessibility statements in various member states in the European Union, and still some of those member states haven't made it 100% clear as to whether an accessibility statement is required or not. Don't know if that's similar to what you've had, James.
Yes, I think it's very similar. So I think there is confusion. You're right. There's confusion at that kind of top level, the Brexit side of things. It doesn't look like the UK is certainly in the short term implementing the EAA into its own national laws. So as you say, there's a confusion with UK-based companies where that applies. I know that some institutions who have bodies who represent them are still waiting for information from those institutions, which is interesting when we're kind of 10 days to go. But also there's language which is unhelpful with existing products and new products with regards to legislation. So if you've got a cash machine, then that's an existing product very clearly. But if you've got a website which isn't going to sit static for the next 5 years, then does that count as a new product or an existing product? It's a bit like Trigger's broom. It might have been there for 10 years, but it's definitely not the same product that was there before. So there is that side of things. I totally agree. I think that generally the clients who are working with us who get kind of past that point where they go, okay, this is definitely something we need to do, like that stop sign you were speaking about, they're responding to this really positively, and most of our clients are viewing it as an opportunity, which is great. They see the EAA, the legislation, as an opportunity. So obviously, I think no one's arguing that making their products more accessible is a bad thing. So yeah, the clients who are working with that are definitely embracing that. I had a tip, kind of a product owner style tip. Knowledge is king, and so we've obviously talked about how there is confusion around that. So definitely try to understand especially if you're an agency, and so your clients, what's their need. Obviously, they will be referring to their own legal teams and their own institutional bodies who look after them, but you need to know like what the requirements are for them, and then work out where your product doesn't meet those requirements for today. So just understanding as much as you can before going into the next stage, which would be interacting with William or with that kind of thing.
Sure, that's really great stuff, guys. And I especially like what you said there, James, about people seeing it as an opportunity, because I think there's definitely a wider scope there, isn't there? It's not just about the compliance. It's about trying to do the right thing for users and create things that are accessible for everyone. So
yeah, that's right.
Cool. So on to the next question. Are there any specific watch outs or common pitfalls that product teams should be looking out for? What sort of mistakes are you seeing when teams are trying to comply or improve accessibility? James, I don't know if you want to kick us off on this one.
Yeah, sure. Common pitfalls. So I think probably William would agree with this as well. Treating accessibility as an add-on would definitely be one of the first. So if you embrace it as something that you do from the very beginning, so having an accessibility first approach, then you're putting yourself in a position where you're working towards success rather than the failure. If you only ever regard it as something that you do at the end, just sweep up and make sure we've hit these targets, then I think you're always setting yourself up for a fall. Having limited or even siloed expertise in your teams is obviously a big hindrance. So you don't know what you don't know, and then of course if you're lucky enough to have experts like William in your team or available to you, if there's only one person who's interacting with that role, then it becomes very difficult for your wider teams to know that. And then I think the last one would be not having the client on the journey with you. So I appreciate I'm speaking from an agency perspective when I talk about client, but actually everyone's got stakeholders. So if you're a product owner, you might well be wanting to bang a drum, but if you don't have that buy-in from your stakeholders, then it's very difficult to make that the kind of volume that you want to make, and you might end up in a place where you're ticking boxes, still sweeping up, rather than having it intrinsically as part of your journey. What do you? I don't know if they resonate with you, William.
Yeah, I think so, especially some of the things you've said about siloing accessibility knowledge. It's something that we see so often, that you create one person that is that hub of knowledge within a business, and then they leave, and then suddenly it's all gone. Or they're the sole person that is treated as the sole person responsible for ensuring things are accessible when it's part of everyone's role, from the kind of like start of the design process right through the development process. It's a conversation that should be had at every single stage. Another thing that I think I see a lot of people doing is they focus on the guidelines, which are fantastic for giving you guidance, but they don't engage users with disabilities, actually get feedback from individuals, and consider other ways that they can be improving the accessibility of what they're creating. It's perfectly feasible to create a website, for instance, that meets the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and the website still not be accessible because you've not considered how everything's coming together and what the journeys the users may actually want to make are. And even kind of tying in things that we do, just like undertaking user journey testing with screen readers and assistive technologies. Those are really important things that if developers and designers can learn how to do some of those things, it can really become something that is beneficial for them when trying to implement accessibility in the broader picture of things.
Yeah, that's really good. I think I saw something the other day which supported what you said. It was kind of a pithy one-liner that said accessibility is not just screen reader access. And I guess that's what you're encapsulating there, isn't it? That there's a user journey, which, and there are so many different requirements at so many different, with so many different expectations. And so it's not just what does it sound like when it reads it out, but considering how your content works, with so many different users. Thinking about those with like using my dad as an example, seeing him with his smartphone that he got 6 months ago, and how he interacts with that versus how I interact with that is very different. You know, he wouldn't consider himself someone with a disability, but he definitely has lower mobility skills, abilities, than perhaps that I do, just sort of 30 years younger than him. It is really interesting. I was thinking about, go on, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I see this similar in my own family, and kind of it's something that I actually use as a reference sometimes in workshops and things like that. It's talking about kind of like how my parents will use their phone on a very high magnification, again, maybe have slight kind of mobility issues and things like that. They don't see themselves as having a disability, but the considerations that we make around accessibility benefit them as much as they benefit a user that has a more kind of benefit a user that's got a diagnosed disability.
Yeah, it is interesting. We were lucky enough that one of our key stakeholders on a project that we worked on a few years ago always had their magnification set higher. And so when we were launching a new screen and we're putting it through UAT, very often he might come back and say, "Oh, look, this is interesting. This doesn't seem to work well." But it gave us that touch point, and it made us think about that's not, as you say, that's not someone with a diagnosed disability. It's just a different viewpoint in that.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. Great insights there, guys. We need to move on to the next one, just to keep a good time. But I think it's going to be a really useful one for the people listening today, and that's how do you guys stay up to date on best practices, guidance, regulations? Do you have any go-to resources, communities, or sort of anywhere to find a good place to find updates? Will, I'll go to you on that one first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably what James and I are going to say will end up being fairly similar on this, but there's certain places that I absolutely love for getting accessibility updates. There's a Slack group on Slack. It's a kind of accessibility workspace. I think last time I looked, it's got like 11,000 people in or something wild like that. And it's just so useful. You've got a mixture of people that are kind of like myself, accessibility practitioners, to people that are designers, developers, people that are just starting their accessibility journey. And there's a whole plethora of different kind of questions and different pieces of information out there that you can learn from. And sometimes it's even just a case of like, I'll come across something where I'm not too sure as to whether something's an accessibility issue, and just looking for a second opinion, and often even just searching for a keyword, you can get the answers that you're looking for. I equally think though things like newsletters have been really helpful in keeping me aware of kind of changes in accessibility. So getting updates around things like new versions of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, whether they're going into draft and things like that, information about the European Accessibility Act, having those just sent straight to my inbox and then being able to kind of pick and choose the right things has been really useful. But that isn't to say necessarily that just going directly to the documentation can't be useful, especially in the kind of realms of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It can be quite dense to look at initially, but once you kind of start to understand the structure of how the information is laid out, it can be very easy to kind of find the solutions that you're looking for and understand the kind of purpose of each individual success criteria.
Cool. Thanks. Anything from you, James, to add to that one?
I think Will touched upon most things there. There's a reference point which I was using early in my accessibility journey, which is still as relevant today as I think it was then, which is the A11Y project. I think that, yeah, and they have their own, they've got their own site, which is a really, really good starting point. I think, Will, you touched upon the fact that the WCAG guidelines can be quite onerous or can seem quite dense, and that's absolutely true. And you're right that the more you get into it, the more you have a quick reference point for it. I also think that AI can be useful here. So if you're struggling with any criteria, then you can ask your preferred AI tool to do a digest for you. And so I've done that a few times. And so, for example, a designer would have a very different requirement and understanding for a WCAG criteria than a product owner would. So you can literally say, okay, I'm a product owner. I need to understand these criteria. Please help me do that. And it still makes mistakes, but I think it's a good opportunity there, particularly if you're a product owner and you've got a team around you, then understanding what your requirements might be first as an engineer versus a designer. And then just finally, I would say that you're looking at one of my reference points right here. William has been an amazing help to me and on my journey there. So there is expertise all around us when he talks about newsletters dropping into your inbox, absolutely, but personal communities are also really strong, and so or professional context communities. So I've now got a really strong community built around me who are on a learning journey together. But like that 11,000 people on Slack probably started with 4 people. You get those professional contexts as well. So back to you then.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I think I really like the thing about community as well, and just sort of working together to navigate challenges around in this area for sure. So next question is, where do product teams usually begin their accessibility journey? What's the typical first step? Is it getting an audit? Is it having some training, or is it jumping straight into design changes? What's been the most effective? William, I'll go to you on. No, James, I'll go to you on this one first. I think William went last time.
Take it in turns. Yeah, nice. I think it entirely, well, it'd be interesting actually to see, William, what your take on this is. But so from our perspective, it very much depends on where the client is with their product life cycle. So obviously we've got clients who we've been working with for many years on a design build basis. And then we also have clients coming to us with existing products who are asking to assist them with perhaps an audit or something for mobile apps. So those who are coming to us afresh, I think are probably in a place where they're being quite reactive. And so the EAA is a brilliant trigger point for this. And so they're going, okay, so I've got an immediate need, and this immediate need needs to be resolved. So at that point, it's a conversation either with you guys at Zoonou or with us at Brightec, where you say, okay, well, what is your immediate need? What product do you have? So it could be a client that we already have who we've been working with for a long time, or like I said, it could be a new client. And I think that the short-term goals around there are that professional advice that William has already spoken about, and auditing of the product. So again, back to that you don't know what you don't know. So put yourself in a position where you at least know whether the products which are on the table that we wanted to discuss are compliant, or whether there's a fast pass through the product might define there are some very serious issues here which you're going to need to resolve, versus this is already in a really good shape, so let's move to the next stage. I think that after that, you then get into the really lovely stage where you have the ongoing, how do we maintain this? Now we're compliant. What's the further strategy, which would be something else to talk about in terms of how product owners manage that. And then the other side of it is clients who are new to us but don't have a product out there yet. And so at that point, we're able to have some really amazing conversations with them where we're saying, okay, so have you thought about accessibility? Most of them say, yes, absolutely, we have. Working with a new client who said, we want to be the most accessible product in our market, which is fantastic. So then obviously the conversation is very different when there's no product to audit or to assess yet, because we're building it from scratch. So yeah, different ends of the product telescope, but well, over to you.
Yeah, I think we've probably come in a slightly different place initially with most people. Is kind of, for most people, we're coming in when someone's saying to us, we want an audit, typically on something that's already existing. But periodically, or occasionally, we do get people that are coming to us saying, we're building something, we're creating something, we want it to be accessible from the off. But either way, kind of, once you've done that first kind of audit, if you're coming in kind of mid software development life cycle, or kind of at the end of this development life cycle, once you have had that first audit, you're then back into that kind of like, how can we work together on this on a much longer term? How can you ensure that accessibility is something that is being continually thought about throughout the future development process of everything? And that's where things like kind of design reviews and kind of feedback on different feature ideas and things like that get really important. And you start to develop those relationships like you talked about, where you really understand the passion that people have around wanting to ensure their products are accessible too. And sometimes for us, it's a really nice thing to see kind of the change in attitudes of people as we're working with them, and seeing how much more on board they are after getting some feedback and understanding how impactful the issues are that are being raised, and the way that they are then a lot more committed to ensuring what they're creating is accessible.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. Yeah, I think did you have something else to add, James? Or did I cut you off?
I was just wondering, so in terms of things like we're talking about alongside-ing and growing expertise, you guys offer training as well, don't you? Which is something that, you know, if you're talking about a long-term relationship, is that something you find some of your clients will work with and pick up on?
Yeah, definitely. I think this comes back to the removal of siloing information within a business, ensuring that a variety of people within the business know what their responsibilities are, know why accessibility is important, understand a little bit more around the kind of legislation and the legal aspects of accessibility and the guidelines and things like that as well. So I think that through training and the kind of I guess kind of consultancy type things that we do as well, we can really help people start on their journey through accessibility, and then kind of get them to a point where you have some people within the business that start to feel like accessibility experts themselves as well, because they've really put the time and effort.
Yeah, that's right. It's really good.
That's great, guys. I'm going to move us on just because we want to keep on schedule to get through all the questions, and also have some time at the end for Q&A. So the last question that we have as part of our list is looking ahead. What do you think the future of accessibility looks like? Do you have any predictions for technology, regulations, and general culture around accessibility? What should product owners be thinking about now? And Will, I'm going to come to you for this one first.
I think one of the big things that everyone's talking about to some degree or other is AI. I went to a really interesting event with the R&ID a couple of weeks ago where they had someone there talking about how AI is improving accessibility around things like sign language and creating kind of AI agents or AI tools that can speak sign language and what's the word, kind of respond to things with sign language as well, which seems really impressive and exciting. But equally, one of the things that was mentioned at this talk that has stuck with me a bit is how AI agents are going to become so important in the future. And a thing that I've been discussing internally with some of my colleagues in my team is around the idea that for an AI agent to have the access to provide information to individuals, you need a website or an application that's well built and has the correct markup and things like that, much in the way a screen reader requires that. So by creating websites that are accessible, you're also creating websites that are going to be easier to use with AI agents. And in turn, by doing that, you're opening up other ways of users being able to interact with websites or book restaurants and things like that, using new technology that might allow them to do more than currently they can do.
Cool. Any thoughts, James?
I was just thinking about that and just how interesting that is. That again, it's showing how the importance of what we do locally, if you like, on our own projects actually resonates far wider. And so what we're talking about there is you set yourself up for success for accessibility on your booking platform, but that means that someone else is using a third-party platform, using speech access on their phone, for example, and just how that then enables them to book into your restaurant. So there's a real clear line drawn between the work that you might potentially do for your own client or for your own company, and then how that pays out across different platforms that you weren't necessarily expecting. That's really interesting. I think sticking on AI just for a second, one of the things which we find is that auditing mobile apps is far harder. Well, not harder, sorry, but the automated tooling that's available struggles to get under the skin of a mobile app in a way that automated tooling doesn't for websites. Websites are an open box, and mobile apps are effectively a closed box. And at the AXCON this year, there was lots of talk about how the AI agents involved in those toolings are going to get better and going to be able to unpack that box a little bit more easily, which is great. It's great for everyone. It means that it potentially might be something that clients can have themselves, to check their own projects, but certainly better for companies like Zoonou and Brightec being able to perhaps more robustly check certain areas which otherwise were hidden. I'm not sure whether this is what's coming next or something I'd love to see on the same topic. WCAG guidelines are fantastic, and really, really are good, and they're a very clear benchmark, which we're obviously then able to use to assess and to present accessibility audits, etc. However, they are designed for web and they're not designed for mobile apps, and certainly a fair bit of the time that William and I have spent together talking has been around, so you've got this criteria, how does that apply to a mobile app? Because it's the way it's designed, the way it's engineered is a very different beast. So I would love to see a subset of the WCAG which focuses specifically on mobile apps and actually takes into account the platforms that they live on. So the Apple ecosystem, the Android ecosystems, they both have their own approaches to that as well, which create interesting situations when we're talking with how we fix things and what's a failure. Is this a failure because you can do this? I think there's opportunity there, which hasn't been fully explored yet.
Cool. Really interesting, guys. I'm going to move us on again to the attendee Q&A now, just so we've got a good sort of 10 minutes to run through as many questions as we can. So the first one that we've got here, interesting one, you might have to bear with me on the word. Okay, so if you're a UK digital team dealing with EU customers, but Brexit means we're not technically part of the EU, are we still forced to follow the European Accessibility Act? Do we still need to do anything? Who wants to take that one? Let's go hands up on this one. Who wants to jump on it first?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So yeah, in short, if you're providing a service or product into the EU, you will need to be conforming to the European Accessibility Act. So what that might mean is that you are a clothes store and you have a store in Northern Ireland, and you also sell your clothes into mainland Ireland as well. You'd need to be ensuring that you're meeting the European Accessibility Act and any of the regulations that have been set out by mainland Ireland in order to be accessible. And within each individual member state, there might be certain things that you're required to do that aren't required in other member states. And this could be things like having an accessibility statement, as I was referring to earlier, or kind of little additional things that aren't included within EN 301549, which is the standard that's referenced within the European Accessibility Act.
Cool. Thanks, Will. And to be honest, that's a question that we get asked a lot when we're speaking to new potential clients and things like that. Is just that clarity around, you know, who does this actually apply to? Like, everything is a little bit complicated, but hopefully that clears it up for some people. James, did you have anything on that one, or are you happy for me to move on to the next?
I'm happy for you to move on. I think William covered everything there.
Perfect. All right. So next one, guys. And this one is higher education specific. What are the direct implications of EAA on higher education institutions, especially with online courses in mind, as well as the websites that are based in the UK? Are there any additional requirements that we should be aware of in addition to what PSBAR dictates?
Shall I jump in on that one?
Yeah, go on. Will.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a really interesting question. I think some of this is going to come down to where your online courses are being delivered to. Again, if it's an online course that is solely being accessed by people within the UK, then it's unlikely that the European Accessibility Act will have any impact on what you're offering. However, if it is something that's being offered to people that are within the EU as well, then you certainly be having to consider it as part of any accessibility considerations that you have. So for those that aren't aware, PSBAR is the Public Sector Body's Accessibility Regulations, which is a separate piece of legislation that requires public sector bodies, so that can be universities, governments, councils, museums and things like that within the UK, to be meeting specific accessibility requirements. Those are currently defined as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.2, level AA. So currently, I would say that if you're meeting those within the UK and you don't have anything that you're sharing out of the UK into the EU, then you don't need to do anything additional. If you're sharing stuff into the EU, then you may need to at least look at notifying specific governing bodies in the regions that you're sharing content into or sharing services into around any accessibility issues that you're aware of.
Definitely one of those opportunities, isn't it, where there is guidance and the cold hard fact of, do I need to do this or not? But there's also the consideration that if you are meeting the criteria are there because it's trying to make your products more inclusive and more accessible. So even within the UK, there's a percentage base who benefit from that. I quite often now watch YouTube videos with captions on. I've just got used to doing it. And I think there is a trend, particularly among even younger people, who will watch with captions on. I know that's only one subset of online training, but you're catching others at the same time while you're meeting these criteria. And if you start to bake that in now without a huge amount of change perhaps to your processes, then you might find that you're meeting the guidelines whilst reaching out to a wider audience base as well.
Yeah, even I've got captions on even this meeting at the moment, because I just find it helps me keep track of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. Will, I always have the captions on. Just helps, doesn't it? It helps taking the information. Cool. So next question, and this isn't referring to the last question. I believe this is referring to the conversation on the whole. But how can all of this be addressed by small teams or sole trading businesses that maybe don't have the resources to do best practice for accessibility?
Maybe does that depend on how small the team is? Because
yeah, certainly there are some exclusions within the European Accessibility Act. It relates both to turnover and size of team. I believe it's some, off the top of my head, 2 million euros, 2 million euros turnover, and a team that's smaller than 10 people. So that would mean that potentially you wouldn't have to be meeting the European Accessibility Act, but it should still be something that you're considering from a kind of growth point of view. As the business grows, you might get to a point where you do need to be meeting that, and therefore having the work done in advance is something that's really good to have done. It's much harder to retroactively fit accessibility into what you've already built than it is to be considering accessibility early on. But yeah, certainly double check with any kind of legal advice that you get on there, just to make sure that you aren't, what's the word? That you don't have to be meeting the European Accessibility Act if you've got a team that small.
Yeah, and there's a risk, isn't there, that if you have a team of 11 and then you employ one new person, then suddenly all of your products need to meet that criteria.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Ideally, you're going to hope to get to that stage where you're probably going to be having to be accessible either way.
Yeah. So in terms of tips, if it's a resource issue, then William's absolutely right that by baking in these processes from the get-go is definitely then easier to maintain in the long term. And I think, obviously don't know anything about your team, but assuming that you had a typical structure, if you're an engineering team, of having product design and engineering, then you can spread that load across the team. Everyone can take responsibility for certain things. And so we have a design checklist, and all the design team will go through that. We build it into our definition of done. So in our Jira tickets, other product tools are available, and in just ensuring then therefore everyone's responsible for those component parts, which just definitely lifts, it reduces the burden on any one person, and it stops it being such an onerous obligation, and it just becomes part of what you do anyway as part of your best practice.
Cool. Guys, I think we've got time for maybe one more question that we'll try and squeeze in within a 2-minute window if we can. I think this one's more weighted towards James, but just on the mobile side, what happens if the accessibility issues raised are system level and as an app developer they can't fix? Will Apple and Google be addressing those as a need to meet the EAA and be compliant?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I think the answer is no. I don't think that Apple or Google are going to feel the obligation to meet the EAA criteria. Will I invite you to chime in at any one point, but I think that the point of that is that both Google and Apple have very, very different approaches towards accessibility, and this is what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about the WCAG aimed more towards mobile apps. There are just some things which don't make sense, isn't quite the right word, but there's obviously intent and then there's application. And so in the WCAG, there are things where it says make sure that your your page markup is using ARIA regions, for example. That's just not something that applies to the mobile app world. But the intent behind that to make sure that your page is logical and reads in a particular order is still valid. So there are ways to interpret the WCAG, but you're right to ask that question, because I believe that Apple and Material may well actually diverge slightly further from the WCAG over time, unless there's a synergy between them. Well, I don't know what your thoughts are on that as well.
Yeah, I think what you've said is kind of fairly accurate on there. I would be hesitant to say that these are definitely things that are going to get resolved by Apple and Google respectively, but I'd imagine it will put some more pressure on them. I know I've seen other businesses such as Shopify, for instance, being a lot more proactive and wanting to know about accessibility issues that are present within their services so that they can ensure that their end clients aren't being forced into non-compliance by their service and things like that. So hopefully we'll see some of the stuff from Apple and Google as well.
Cool. Thanks so much for that, guys. What's really great is we've actually had a bunch more questions than that in the Q&A as well, but unfortunately, the time limit on this one was 45 minutes, so we don't quite have enough time to answer them all. But we'll follow up with everyone else directly who has questions, and we'll get you some sort of answer. The other thing is, as we wrap up, we'd really like to invite you to Zoonou Connect, which is a more personal, small group conversation hosted by Zoonou and joined by Brightec. We're bringing together digital product owners to share challenges, exchange ideas, and learn from each other's experiences with digital accessibility. It's a chance to continue this conversation and the wider conversation around these things in a collaborative, peer-led setting, focused on what's working, what's not, and how we can all move forwards together. If you're interested in being involved, just let us know. We'd love to have you as part of that discussion. Watch out for an email after this session, which will contain more information and a registration. Thanks so much, everyone, and we really hope to see you again soon. And thanks, Will and James, for really great answers.
Pleasure.
Thanks all.
Cool.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.